As part of my 60th birthday celebrations, I decided to tick one off my bucket list. The North Coast 500, driving around the Highlands of Scotland, has been a want of mine for such a long time. Luckily, I had a willing victim, friend, in brackets, who would come with me, and we had the most amazing adventure. I used the Robbie Roams travel guides, the North Coast 500, to get some ideas about where we were going to stay and how to break the journey up. The only thing we did before we went was we booked all the accommodation. Other than that, it was very much spur of the moment. What are we going to do today? And we broke the journey up from Lincolnshire up to Carlisle on the first day, and I had to fit, obviously, looking at some stones on the way up there because that's one of my passions. Our first stopover was at a place called Crossroads House, and what can I say about it? Well, it was nothing like the pictures. It was very scruffy, and what was good about it? The only good thing was the Roman well under the stairs. Who would have thought something like that was tucked in there? But yes, we didn't stay for breakfast, even though it was in with our room, and we escaped, and we're very glad to get into day 2, the trip Carlisle to Inverness. First stop on our way up to Inverness was the Caledonia Park Designer Outlet. We were passing and we needed breakfast, so it was a great excuse to have a look round. Then the next stop was further up, which was the House of Brewer, and that was such a lovely place to look round. The shopping was great. I may just have found a necklace depicting standing stones, so that was my treat to myself for my 60th birthday. And then behind the building is the Falls of Brewer, and the sun came out, it was warm, and it was just such a glorious place to spend time. We ate in the restaurant, we had this amazing walk. What a way to start a fabulous holiday. Our next accommodation, the Alban and Abbey House in Inverness, was great. Clean rooms, much better. And we started the next day with a walk up to Inverness to look at the castle, had breakfast round the corner. And they had homemade raspberry croissants and the best coffee I'd had since leaving home. Back on the road, we were off to Chancery Point. The lighthouse there was beautiful to look at, but it was the dolphins I'd gone to see. Everybody had promised you'd see dolphins there. Sadly, we didn't see any that day, but we did have a relaxing, mindful hour, just sitting and staring out to sea. So after the magical walk around the Fairy Glen, we went on to do some more stone bothering along the Pictish Trail and then on to Dornoch Beach, which is shown now. We also stopped at Cocoa Mountain in Dornoch, which was recommended in a lot of the books as the best hot chocolate you could ever had. But sadly for us, it smelt of damp dogs and the hot chocolate, well, I left it. And anybody that knows me knows I do not leave chocolate. So no, I wouldn't recommend that. But we then checked into 2 huge rooms at the Strathview Lodge, which were very comfortable and quiet. And we had our own private balcony where we sat and enjoyed our dinner in the sunshine, looking out to sea. Started the day listening to the birds singing and watching the sunrise with a coffee sitting on the balcony. And then it was off to Dunraven Castle, which is only 13 minutes away from our accommodation. The sun shone and it was so warm we abandoned our coats. And I even managed to find more Pictic stones in their little museum. I was told the beaches in the Highlands were really special, and they didn't disappoint. A happy hour was spent wandering in the sunshine. We were so lucky with the weather. Every day the forecast was a bit cloudy in the morning and then beautiful sunshines in the afternoon. The Whaley steps. Well, I'm scared of heights, and this took a lot of deep breaths and concentration to complete, but it was so worth it. It consists of 365 man-made steps down to a natural harbour, and the steps towards the top are very well maintained, but the further you get, the drops at the side become sheerer and the stones become more uneven. So it was with great trepidation I made it down, and with a lot of puffing and panting we made it back up. One of the photos you'll see is our feet, and it's where somebody had scratched into the stone the halfway mark, and I was actually quite glad to get there on the way back up. But I hope you enjoy the photos because it really is beautiful. The grey cairns of Campster. I have to give you a warning now, apologies for my rear view. I'm not sure Jo would have signed up for this road trip if she'd realised the daft places I suggest visiting. Crawling inside cairns where there's no phone signal if you get stuck. Thankfully we both made it out alive, even if I did get a bit stuck on the exit. We had a laugh as well as interesting experience before finally landing in Wick at our holiday cottage for the night.
Oh my God. I can't see you now, but I can see you on my phone.
Can prove I came in.
I'm videoing you, so don't swear.
Oh,
Oh, it's quite high up now you're in. You did it. I think I might be able to do that. I can't crawl, I would have to duck down.
I can't do ducking. It's actually got a skylight. Our phone recordings make it look a lot lighter than it actually was. The actual tunnel bit was pitch black, and it was only when you got actually into the chamber itself that there was actually some natural light coming through. So we were quite proud of ourselves for doing this. I watched the sunrise over the harbour with my morning coffee, and then off we went to find the castle. It was a bit overcast to begin with, but the moody skies made it very atmospheric at Castle Sinclair. A lot of the signs on the beaches, anytime you're near the coast, it tells you to look out for the dolphins and look out for the whales. And I was desperate to see dolphins, but guess what? No dolphins here either. I think we picked the perfect time of year for the NC500. John O'Groats, we really enjoyed our time there. We didn't have to queue. There was hardly anybody about. A coach came in after, just as we were leaving. We had a lovely leisurely time in the sunshine, had a quick look around the tourist shops, had a coffee and cake. I enjoyed it so much more than I thought I would. Out of all the beautiful beaches we went to on our trip, I think Strathy Beach is my absolute favourite. The rock formations, the caves, it was just stunningly beautiful. We had a lovely time there, exploring, enjoying the sunshine and listening to the waves. And then on to our stay at the Betty Hill Hotel, which was one of my favourite places to stay. Clean, comfy rooms, stunning views. The view from the restaurant was amazing, and the food was, I couldn't fault it. Absolutely the best fish pie in the entire Scotland, and it is the perfect stopover en route for the NC500, so I could highly recommend it. When I first looked at our route and looked at the Tongue Causeway, I had a little bit of trepidation, the thought of driving through the sea, but actually the tide was out when we got there. So it was a very interesting place to see, and that's quite a long road across, but it was definitely easier to drive knowing there was no sea lapping either side of me. I can blame Joe for this one. Not my mad idea for a change. Yes, we went paddling in the sea, and oh my word, we couldn't stay in there very long. It was icy to the point of it hurt. But hey, we can say we've been in the sea in Scotland. I was sitting on a rock drying my feet, bemoaning the fact that I'd seen very little wildlife while we'd been travelling, when suddenly Joe started laughing, and when I looked round, this little chap was literally behind me on the rock, looking as if to say, you know, are you going to feed me? He was really cute. Another one of the highlights of the trip was Smoo Cave. Again, another climb down, and we did actually the circular tour and went right up onto the cliffs at the back. Thoroughly enjoyed all the walking we were doing, especially in such beautiful weather. It was a really atmospheric place and fascinating, even if the waterfall was not falling and had no water. But yeah, another one I would highly recommend. Our stop at Aden House B&B was the perfect place to stop over. It's a lady's home. She treats you like part of the family, but you're left in beautiful, quiet, clean rooms with this amazing scenery out the window. And the sunsets and the sunrise were a real treat to watch. An amazing breakfast, bowls of fresh fruit as well as a full cooked breakfast. She really went the extra mile for us, and it's a place I would highly recommend. Clean, comfortable, quiet, a fabulous place to stop. From now on, we're going to start going along and down the west coast. And the east coast was all about amazing things to do and go and see, and now it really is all about the scenery. We're talking more beaches, waterfalls, caves, just stunning, beautiful scenery. I can't pronounce the name of this waterfall, so I'm not going to try. But when we looked in the book, it said, it was well worth the scramble over the rocks to see it. I didn't quite realise how much of a scramble it was going to be. It was a real test on the legs and the ankles to get there. But as everything I've found in Scotland, it's well worth the trip. Many of the roads you encounter are single track, so I thought we'd do a little video just to show you a bit what it's like with the passing places. I'm in a Land Rover and I've filled the road, so you can imagine what it's like when you meet some of the big camper vans. But it was really good fun.
Can you imagine it in the snow? No, you'd be skiing down here.
The nice with not planning any day meant that when we're driving along and we see something interesting, we can just stop. So when we saw this and realised there was a way across to it, it was time to go and have a little explore. And again, another interesting sight is it's very hard to explain in the photographs how the atmosphere of the place is felt. But yeah, very, very interesting, very atmospheric. And I'm glad we stopped. The Bone Caves. What can I say? This was nearly a visit too far. There was a fab mobile coffee stand in the car park, so fortified with sausage rolls and the best coffee I'd had since Inverness, we thought the 5 kilometres to the cave would be easy. I was wrong. It started off an easy climb, but then the path became rockier, steeper, and the side had sheer drops. It wasn't always obvious where you were meant to be going. Oh, what was I thinking? I hate heights. But being stubborn, I carried on and even crawled up parts. I was so determined to get to the caves. I think Joe was probably ready to push me off the edge when we got there, and the caves had a very unsettling feeling. You could see how hot and sweaty we are in the photos. We really did need coats on. I'd been so determined that I hadn't thought about the descent, and in the end we decided to go over the edge at an angle, as whichever way we went, it was scary, so I slid down on my backside, and then it took over an hour to hike back. So on top of the morning's hike to the waterfall and all our other stops, this really was a mistake. Definitely one to do when you're fresh and not at the end of the day. Well, a broken radiator in our room meant that we got an upgrade to a fabulous big room with our own private balcony. Winner, winner. It's just a shame that the restaurant didn't manage to serve Prosecco with any fizz in it, as I really needed one after the Bone Caves. But it was lovely to sit out in the mizzle in the morning. This was the first night we'd had rain since being in Scotland. And actually it was really refreshing, and I just sat there in my big dry robe with my cup of coffee, watching the clouds and the ever-changing light. And I really, really enjoyed it. And then soon we were back in the car, back on our way again, and the only time it rained was when we were in the car. So I really can't believe how lucky we were. The gorge is part of a nature reserve managed by the National Trust Scotland, which was a winner-winner because being members of the National Trust in England means you get free entry in Scotland as well as free parking. I nearly didn't go, even though it was really near to where we were staying. It was the fact that they said it had a big suspension bridge over the gorge, and being scared of heights, I just thought I can't do this. But there must be something in the water in Scotland because I did manage it, and I'm so glad I did. After beautiful vistas of fabulous scenery, we arrived at the Torridon estate, where we had a mini apartment booked for the night. There was no evening meal there, so we had a quick look round, had a look at our room. It was a very interesting old house. It's owned by I think a music producer and his artist wife, and there seems to be a lot of young foreign visitors who we presumed were running the place, possibly on a work-stay basis, but who knows, because the communication was a little difficult because of the language barrier. But the room seemed warm and clean, though neither of us were really aware of what sort of night we were in for. But we went off to Shieldig, to the bar and coastal kitchen, which comes highly recommended in a lot of the guides. And it was an okay meal, but very expensive. Not as good as some of the other places we've been. But that said, it was the only place open. At least they had Prosecco, even if they charged £10 per glass. Before we set off on the last leg, let's talk about the night at the Torridon estate. 6 out of our nights away, we had our own rooms, but over the weekend, for 4 nights, there was absolutely nothing available, so we shared twin rooms. This room had a separate bathroom, bedroom and dining room, basic but comfy, and remodelled from an old part of the house, used by the children and next to the old schoolroom in times gone by. We got off to sleep by 10, as most days of fresh air, long walks and good food mean sleep is not a problem. However, this night I was woken by Jo, who was trying to say my name but couldn't get the words out. When I switched the light on, I could only describe it as seeing her trying desperately to talk and to move, but not being able to, and after a while she was able to move again and described feeling someone grabbing her leg and pulling her out of bed. And then when she tried to reach the light, her arms were pinned by her side. Was it sleep paralysis, night terror, or everything? I know Jo, she looked very fretful, so let's just say the light stayed on. Not much sleep was to be. Once I heard the gun chorus and I knew Jo was taking it to rest, I'd say eventually, this is for the last time we had. And to look photos because I had been told that there was a chance of seeing them online. The photos are of the estate, and its quiet peacefulness restored my equilibrium. But sadly, apart from birds, all of the wildlife was elusive. So ready to leave in the morning, and we're heading off to Applecross. But first we nipped round to the Torridon Hotel to see their beautiful Highland cattle, which they have grazing sometimes on the lawns, and they were in their field when we got there. They were the first Highland cattle we'd seen since being in Scotland, and I was actually thinking I was going to come home without seeing any. So really pleased to see them. Now the guidebook had warned us that the sat-nav would take us along the Black Nabar straight to Applecross. So I actually had a look at Google Maps and we ended up going around the coastal route. We were tired enough from lack of sleep, so we decided that was the best way to go. And I'm so glad because we started to see the wildlife, the free-range goats and the sheep, and to see that mirror reflection from the sky. It was like glass, the water was. So a very beautiful route, but again quite a challenge to drive in itself. Very narrow lanes, some sheer drops, but worth it for the beautiful scenery. I'd had a picture of it in my head of seeing stags on hillsides with beautiful antlers. Hadn't really thought that at this time of year they would just be the buds growing back again after they'd lost them. But in Applecross we did get to see some deer, we got to see more beautiful Highland cattle, and then we also stopped off in a walled garden for a lovely cup of coffee and some honey cake before attempting the Black Nabar. Black Nabar means Pass of the Cattle, and it features the steepest ascent of any road in the UK. It's a single track historic drover's lane which travels up and down and around hairpins through the mountains of the remote Applecross Peninsula. It was everything I expected, and it was actually really good fun to drive. If you could do it without drivers, it would be other drivers, it would be fantastic. But as it is, you still get to play chicken on the edge of a cliff, wondering at what speed the next vehicle coming towards you would be going, and if you'd have time to get in a passing place or get shoved over the edge. The photos really don't do it justice, but it's definitely one to tick off the bucket list. To celebrate surviving the other drivers on the Black Nabar, we stopped for a fabulous lunch at the seafood bar. I'm not sure Joe's forgiven me yet for eating creatures with their eyes still on, but it was delicious and the view was just stunning. And then after we went on to the Rogie Falls, which had a circular walking route that took in some beautiful scenery and glorious sunshine. We stopped in Dingwall at the Garfield B&B and there was no evening meals, so a short walk into town to Miss Ying's Thai food shop and takeaway. We just managed to secure a table as it's a tiny place and it was packed all night with locals and visitors alike. Excellent food and great value for money. They only take cash, so we went prepared and I can highly recommend it if you're ever that way. Time to finish the last bit of our journey and start the long drive home, but first we thought we'd give it one last go at seeing the dolphins. It meant going back up the east coast a little bit, and knowing what a long drive ahead I had, I did wonder if I was wise. But we went, and just as we walked out of the car park onto the beach, Joe spotted a fin. It was mesmerising. We then watched for 45 minutes as the pair swam around just offshore, sometimes together, sometimes one driving the fish towards the other. No big jumps, just the occasional exhalation of hair through their blowholes and their seesaw motion as they dived and surfaced. It was really magical. We even saw grey seals as well as the dolphins that day, but sadly there was no otters this trip. The only ones I saw were on the back of the Scottish notes. Then on to the Culloden battlefield. To see Culloden on a dark, cold, windy day must be very atmospheric. However, it was hot and sunny when we went. It's run by the National Trust and had a great cafe and gift shop, plus the museum was very interesting, especially the immersive cinema experience, where the screen surrounds you so you feel you're right in the middle of the battle. I must confess, if it wasn't for Outlander, I would have had no idea about the history. But it was quite moving to walk out onto the battlefield and to see the stones erected to mark where each clan had fallen and the little thatched cottage that had made a makeshift field hospital. The skylarks were singing, it was beautiful and sunny, but every now and then you would feel an immense feeling of grief in some of the spots as you walked round. Not far from Culloden are the Clava Cairns. The Clava Cairns are a 4,000-year-old Bronze Age burial complex and are widely considered the inspiration for Craignadoon in Outlander. Again, we go back to Outlander series. The beautiful dapple sunshine shone through the trees as we wandered this peaceful site, and it was definitely one of those memorable sights for me and will stay with me for quite a while.
Yeah.
The size of the dirt. So finally we're on to the last leg home. Not wanting to get home too quickly, we took a beautiful scenic route around to see the Lune Headstone Circle near Barnard Castle. It was actually very, very small and quite hard to spot to begin with, but when I did find it, it was worth it for the beautiful, beautiful views. And then further on along the line, we decided to stop at Mainsgill Farm Shop and Cafe, which is famous for its camels and llamas. Quite a surprise when you drive by it to begin with. Great for food and shopping, and we had a lovely meal, final meal of the holiday before heading home. So to sum up our trip, yes, it lived up to my expectations and more. I didn't realise just how much we'd be able to fit in, not feel rushed and really relax and enjoy ourselves. I was very lucky to have such a great co-pilot, Joe. Thank you so much. The photo sums me up quite nicely, I think. Twat, by the way, is an island in Orkney, and I'm already planning next year's trip to visit Skye, the Inner and Outer Hebrides in Orkney, and of course Twat.